Hey guys, tonight we're wandering into the winding streets of ancient Greece, where the air is filled with smoke from hearth fires and the chatter of merchants, philosophers, and gossiping neighbors. You can almost hear the shuffle of sandals over dusty stones and smell the mix of olive oil, fresh bread, and that faint tang of goat hair drifting in the breeze. And yes, goats. Because tonight, our strange story begins not with lions or leopards, but with something far more humble, a goat on a leash, proudly trotting beside its owner like a scruffy four-legged celebrity. You probably wouldn't survive this. Of course, imagine trying to walk a goat through the chaos of Athens' crowded agora without losing a sandal or your dignity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like sharing, leave me a comment with your location and the local time where you are right now. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You picture yourself in a small Greek town, perhaps on an island where the sea is never far away. A neighbor passes by with a curious companion, a goat trotting at his side, tugging gently at a rope leash. Its cloven hooves click against the stones, and every few steps it pauses to nibble a sprig of greenery poking up from between the paving cracks. This is not a farm animal on its way to market. This is someone's pet. The Greeks were practical people, but they also had a flair for the unexpected. Goats were everywhere in their lives, providing milk, cheese, skins, and sometimes meat. Yet every so often, a particular goat was spared the more utilitarian fate. Perhaps it was unusually friendly, following children around the courtyard, or perhaps it had distinctive coloring, white patches against dark fur that caught the eye. Such a goat might be tied with a bright ribbon, given a name, and walked through the town as though it were a prize dog. You can imagine the mixed reactions. Some neighbors chuckle at the sight, others nod approvingly, and one or two mutter about how the streets are no place for a bleating, nibbling creature. Historians still argue whether goats truly enjoyed being led through town or merely tolerated it in exchange for handfuls of figs. Either way, the bond was real. At home, these pet goats lounged in shaded courtyards, sometimes sleeping near the family hearth. Children played with them, clambering on their sturdy backs or braiding flowers into their horns. Goats were hardy, good-humored, and surprisingly affectionate once accustomed to human company. A little girl might whisper her secrets into a goat's ear, while her grandmother quietly tolerated the creature's habit of chewing laundry off the line. There are surviving vase paintings and fragments of poetry that suggest this fondness was more than a passing quirk. Some pastoral poems describe goats almost like friends, gentle companions in the stillness of the fields. And in the noisy city, they became a reminder of the simpler countryside life, a softening presence against marble and dust. Of course, not everyone approved. Imagine sitting in the agora, deep in philosophical debate, only to be interrupted by a goat bleating loudly while tugging at a bunch of lettuce in your basket. Gentle humor must have filled the air at moments like that, much like today, when a misbehaving pet insists on being part of a serious conversation. Some households treated their goats with such affection that the animals received little adornments, beads tied into their fur, a polished bell around the neck, or even a cushion near the hearth to rest upon. It sounds whimsical, but it also reveals something about Greek hearts. They recognized individuality, even in animals that most people saw as only food. And, as strange as it may sound, walking a goat down a busy street was a way to show a little flair. To lead a goat calmly among the chaos required patience and a bond of trust. Perhaps it was also a small social signal. Look at this creature who follows me willingly. Look at the joy in ordinary things. Tonight, as you picture the goat's soft muzzle brushing against your hand, you can sense that quiet affection across centuries. The past feels closer when you realize how small gestures of companionship, whether with dogs, cats, or even goats, have always been part of human life. You step away from the goat's tugging rope and wander deeper into the city streets, where the stone walls open to reveal the glimmering entrance of a temple. The air here feels quieter, almost charged with reverence, though the silence is broken by an unmistakable chorus of honks. Not the sound of chariots, not the call of men, but geese. A small flock waddles about the temple steps, their long necks craning in every direction, eyes bright, wings occasionally flapping with indignant authority. These are no mere barnyard animals. These are sacred guardians, and sometimes, quite unexpectedly, they were also treated as pets. The Greeks had a complicated relationship with geese. On one hand, they provided eggs, feathers, and the occasional roast dinner. On the other, they were fierce, loud, and surprisingly loyal. If a stranger approached the temple at night, the geese would raise a ruckus loud enough to wake the priests. In fact, there are later Roman tales of geese saving entire cities with their alarm calls, but the Greeks, too, valued them as living watchmen. Imagine the scene: a family living near the temple takes in a gosling, perhaps given by a priest as a token of favor. The bird grows, not into a quiet lap companion, but into a feathery sentinel that follows the household, honking suspiciously at visitors. Children laugh as it flaps its wings and nips at sandals. At dinner, the goose might hover too close, waiting for a dropped fig. It is part nuisance, part beloved member of the courtyard life. Some Greeks even allowed their geese into the house itself. You can picture the company, a goose strutting across polished stone floors, leaving little signs of its presence, or loudly declaring its opinions during family arguments. There are vase illustrations that show women cradling geese in their arms like plump, noisy babies. Perhaps exaggerated, perhaps not, but it suggests how affection could transform even the most ungainly bird into a companion. Historians still argue whether these geese were seen more as sacred symbols or genuine pets. The truth, as often in life, was probably both. For some, keeping a goose close at hand was a matter of good fortune, a way to honor the gods. For others, it was simply that the bird had grown into the family's life until no one could imagine the household without it. Geese, unlike dogs or cats, had a certain comic dignity. They strutted, they scolded, they demanded attention. A goose honking at a neighbor could spark laughter that eased the day's burdens. And yet, their role as sacred creatures gave them a weight of importance too. They were clumsy companions with divine credentials. In the soft evening light, you imagine sitting in a Greek courtyard, weaving wool as a pet goose waddles up beside you, leaning its heavy body against your knee. Its feathers smell faintly of straw and sunlight. You reach down, stroke the smooth curve of its head, and hear it murmur a low, almost cat-like croon. Yes, geese make those sounds, though not everyone notices. A moment of unexpected gentleness slips into the routine of daily life. And so, just as goats once ambled on leashes, geese stood guard at thresholds, shared meals, and sometimes stole hearts. Strange pets indeed, but in their strangeness, they revealed something timeless, the human desire to find companionship even in the least likely places. You leave the noisy geese behind, their honking still, echoing faintly in your ears, and drift toward the quieter lanes of Athens. Here, you notice something curious perched on a wall, a sleek figure with pointed ears and a tail swishing like a pendulum. A cat. Today you hardly give such a sight a second thought, but in ancient Greece, seeing a cat would have been like spotting a celebrity in your neighborhood cafe. They were rare, exotic imports, and when one prowled through a courtyard, it drew whispers of fascination. Cats came to Greece from Egypt, carried across the sea in the holds of trading ships. To the Egyptians, they were sacred animals, guardians of the home, admired for their elegance and uncanny ability to keep mice at bay. When the Greeks first encountered them, they marveled at their grace and mystery. A well-to-do household might acquire one as a status symbol, much like someone today might boast of owning a luxury car. You picture yourself sitting in a shaded courtyard as a neighbor unveils her new treasure, a small cat. Its fur sleek, its eyes glowing like polished amber. The children squeal with delight, and the women lean closer to admire it, comparing it to the more familiar weasels and ferrets that usually kept pests away. The cat arches its back, stretches elegantly, and then, in true feline fashion, ignores everyone and curls up in a basket of figs. Owning a cat in those early days meant telling the world you had connections, merchants who traded not just olive oil and wine, but rarities from foreign lands. The Greeks even borrowed a little of the Egyptian mystique, imagining cats as half divine, creatures who slinked between the human and the mysterious. Some poets hinted that cats could see into unseen worlds, their unblinking stares unnerving even the bold. Historians still argue whether the Greeks truly worshipped them or merely treated them as prized novelties. What is certain is that cats were never entirely ordinary here. They remained uncommon for centuries, outnumbered by dogs, birds, and goats. And yet, in the households that welcomed them, cats quickly did what cats always do, they wormed their way into hearts. A little boy might brag that his cat would only sleep in his lap, while his mother muttered about shredded weaving baskets. A visiting guest might find their cloak claimed by the household cat, curled up smugly on the fabric as though daring anyone to move it. And of course, cats brought their own kind of humor. Imagine a solemn philosophical discussion being interrupted by a cat leaping onto the table, scattering scrolls with complete indifference. Or a carefully arranged offering of food at the household shrine disappearing, thanks to a quick paw and a bold bite. Cats were chaos wrapped in silk. Still, they earned their keep. Unlike geese or goats, cats excelled at pest control. They prowled through granaries and kitchens, keeping rodents at bay. Their usefulness only increased their charm, making them doubly hard to resist. A creature that was both beautiful and practical, what more could a Greek household desire? As the twilight deepens, you imagine stroking the fur of one of these exotic companions, hearing its deep, rhythmic purr as the sounds of Athens fade around you. A goat on a leash might make the neighbors laugh, a goose might startle intruders, but a cat brought an aura of mystery, a touch of foreign wonder, and perhaps even a whisper of divine protection into the home. You follow the quiet swish of the cat's tail around the corner and step back into the hum of the agora, where merchants sing prices into the warm air, and the smell of brine olives mingles with fresh bread. Between sandals and table legs moves another familiar presence, dogs, everywhere threading the crowd as confidently as philosophers thread an argument. A boy tosses a crust, a lean hound catches it midair, a grandmother clucks her tongue in mock disapproval even as she lets the dog lick her fingers clean. You smile. This city of marble and maxims also Runs on paw prints. You crouch beside a small white creature perched on a vendor's lap, its fur cloud soft and its nose the size of an olive pit. The vendor calls it a Melitene lapdog from Melita, wherever that truly is. Historians still argue whether the famed Melitene came from Malta in the Central Sea or from the island of Muljet in the Adriatic, but either way the little dog has an international or some and absolutely no intention of walking when it can be carried. It leans into your palm, sighs like a miniature bellows, and blinks at you as if to say, yes, you may continue admiring me. You do. You have no choice. Around the stall, other dogs do practical work. A wiry ratter scores the ground beneath grain sacks with professional zeal. A brown cur naps under a table, one ear cocked toward the rhythm of approaching footsteps. The Greeks are no strangers to cannon company. Households keep dogs to guard gates, shepherds rely on them against wolves, and hunters prize swift hounds that read the wind like poets. One mainstream truth sits steady here: you hear it in stories, see it painted on vases, and feel it in the swish of tales that dogs are companions, protectors, and partners in war. Beyond the stalls, the mood shifts. You hear a deeper sound, awes thudding like small drums. A Molossian hound strides past, broad-headed and soberate, a living wall of muscle from the mountains of Epirus. These dogs guard flocks and courtyard gates, their thick necks sometimes ringed with leather collars set with iron studs. They are dignified until food appears, at which point they become very fast moral philosophers, arguing with persuasive drool that your loaf would clearly be better off share. You keep your fingers, but you lose exactly one corner of bread to a persuasive gaze. It happens. Dogs pad not only through streets but through poetry. On a well-loved page of epic, an aging hound named Argos recognizes a ragged stranger as his long-lost master, and everyone on the bench pretends not to be wiping eyes. In painted scenes, hunters run with their packs across terracotta hills. In little household shrines, someone tucks a terracotta pup beside a lamp as if to say, may our gate be watched and our nights be easy. Even language plays along. Sharp-tongued philosophers are nicknamed dog-like, though the actual street dog sleeping on their scrolls remains the friendlier critic. You pause by a potter's shop. Hanging by the door are bright collars cut from dyed leather, some with bronze plates incised with names: Thanthos, Lena, Sweetfoot. The potter boasts he can fit a whole hexameter on a tag if you pay enough, which is not exactly necessary, but it is exactly charming. He also sells collars with long spikes for shepherds, a prickly fence meant to keep wolves from finding a throat. You run a fingertip along one, and think how much care hides inside things that look fierce. A quirky touch catches your ear. A few collars carry tiny bells, so a household knows where its wandering heart has gone. Every reunion sounds like a pocket-sized festival. The day warms. A baker keeps two short-legged ratters beneath his counter. They surface like dolphins whenever a sack rustles. A fisherman's mongrel sleeps in a coil of nets and wakes only for the rattle of scales. A child attempts to teach a puppy to sit by demonstrating sit herself, which is excellent company for everyone nearby. You see a woman carrying a basket, and, nestled among the figs, a puppy with ears too large for its head. The puppy has already mastered the ancient art of looking innocent while planning crimes. If your sandal goes missing later, you have met the suspect. Not all Greek dogs are workers. Some are pure companionship. In shaded courtyards, tiny lapdogs curl on cushions near the family loom, occasionally stealing a bobbin to announce that dignity is optional after lunch. Women stroke soft ears while gossip breezes by with the scent of olive wood smoke. In the evening, when the city cools, couples stroll with a docile hound on a braided lead, and you catch an echo of that goat you saw earlier on a ribbon. Different animal, same gentle brag that says, look how calmly this creature walks with me. The Giza temple steps may honk like tiny heralds, the cat may claim the warm chair you just left, but the dog chooses your footsteps. Sacred thresholds know dogs as well. In certain healing sanctuaries, stories say, temple dogs move quietly among the sleepers, and attendants smile when a patient wakes to report a warm tum on a bandaged wrist. On moonlit crossroads, the liminal goddess is said to walk with barking companions, a reminder that watchfulness has always had a voice. Whether you believe these tales or simply enjoy their poetry, you feel how dogs pull fear out of the dark and spin it into protection. Quite a trick, even for creatures who also steal unattended figs. Food, inevitably, becomes part of the bond. Greeks feed their dogs barley bread softened with broth, bits of fish, scraps from stews. The cat pretends not to notice. The cat notices everything. A grandmother mutters that dogs should not be picky. The dog respectfully disagrees by eating the loaf corner first, because rules are tastier when nibbled. You break one last crust and think about how sharing food is the oldest signature of friendship, and also a clever strategy for keeping your lunch safe from a determined nose. Then there are inscriptions, little epitaphs carved for beloved animals that say more with less. To the good dog who kept the courtyard whole, sleep softly. You rest your hand on warm stone and hear, across centuries, the same sighs you've heard in quiet kitchens after a long day, the same doorway waiting, the same tail thumping against the same human knee. Pets are not a modern invention, neither are gratitude and grief. Of course, a bit of mystery lingers. Historians still debate how widespread true lapdog Tampering was beyond wealthy homes, and whether those spiked collars were common fashion or mostly frontier gear. The evidence is suggestive, not complete, much like a dog's muddy paw prints that lead you to the general area of the missing pie but stop inconveniently at the threshold. You accept the ambiguity and scratch a friendly chin. The dog accepts the scratch and the ambiguity. As dusk leans across the stones, the evening sorts itself into silhouettes, the melatonin flashing white as it leaps, uninvited but entirely welcome, into your lap, the Molossian planted at a gate with the patience of a bronze statue until a stranger shuffles too near, the street cur who knows every fishmonger by footstep, the shepherd's partner who sleeps with one ear on the wind. Between these, the Greeks find the spectrum of companionship, play and vigilance, softness and steel. You felt the goat's tug on its ribbon earlier, you heard the G's pronounce opinions at the temple, and you watched the cat claim the sun-hot chair. Now, with a dog at your heel, you feel simply accompanied. You rise, brushing fur from your cloak. Somewhere behind you, the cat immediately reclaims the seat you vacated. Ahead, a goose critiques a neighbor's sandals with a honk. Not far away, the goat contemplates nibbling its own ribbon. You walk on with the easy certainty that, in this city of words and stone, the heartbeat you hear most clearly belongs to the dogs who choose to follow. Tomorrow, perhaps, you will bring a crust, purely for philosophical reasons, of course. You drift from the bustle of the market toward a lively corner where a flute trills and palms clap in easy rhythm. A man in a patched cloak bows, then lifts his arm like a tiny stage. Perched on his shoulder is a creature with quicksilver eyes and hands far too clever for anyone's peace of mind, a monkey. It tilts its head at you, then at the crowd, then steals the performer's whistle and toots a note so proud the geese from the temple would file a noise complaint if they had the paperwork. The crowd laughs. The monkey bows again, solemn as a magistrate, which is already funnier than it should be. Monkeys are strangers made familiar by trade. Sailors bring them across the wine-dark sea from warm coasts farther south and east, bundled in baskets, fed on figs, taught little tricks that make coins ring into cups. You've already walked a goat on a ribbon and been scolded by sacred G's. You've watched a cat invent law and a dog enforce it. But a monkey adds a new note, error and mischief combined. When the flute starts, it hops to the ground and shuffles in time, then freezes in a pose that looks suspiciously like an impression of the stern potter who overcharges for wide bowls. The potter laughs in spite of himself. Being parodied by a small acrobat with a better sense of rhythm than you is an unlisted civic privilege. The Greeks know these creatures from more than street corners. Long before this evening, painters on far islands set bright, bodied monkeys against saffron cliffs in wall frescoes. Later, poets and philosophers mention them with the same mixture of wonder and warning you might use for that neighbor who can pick any lock with a hairpin. Aristotle writes about them in his animal lore, their hands, their games, their sly resemblance to us when we're not at our best. That's a mainstream truth you can lean on like a warm wall. The Greeks encountered monkeys, studied their tricks, and let them scamper through art and anecdote. You step closer. The performer loops a tiny wreath over the monkey's head. The monkey removes it delicately and crowns you instead, because authority is 9/10 of whoever has the wreath. It then inspects your earring with professional interest, clearly considering whether jewelry is a form of pourable fruit. The dog from earlier approaches, tail cautious. The monkey pats the dog's head with grave blessing, then, in the same breath, steals the baker's fig and hides behind your leg as if you invited this partnership. You didn't, but you are now the proud parent of a crime. In households that can afford novelty, a monkey might share a courtyard for a season or two. Wealthy hosts sometimes parade them at symposia, the evening parties where cups of watered wine pass and conversation climbs like ivy. Trained monkeys can fetch deaths, pour a splash too generous into someone's kylix, or clap along to a song. The line between entertainer and pet blurs easily when an animal naps on your cloak and knows where you keep the good nuts. Historians still argue whether monkeys were common household companions or mostly the sidekicks of traveling showmen, but everyone agrees on this: they were unforgettable. The jokes write themselves, because the monkeys write them first. Your new friend has spotted a spindle of yarn and is now demonstrating advanced textile sabotage, looping and unlooping with the wicked joy of a child who learned knots yesterday and wants to major in unteeing. A grandmother hurries over, reclaiming her thread with a scold softened by a smile. The monkey accepts the lecture and the almond she slips it at the end, which tells you everything about how discipline works in courtyards. A quirky tidbit the old woman shares: she once knew a monkey who learned to slide roof tiles just enough to startle pigeons into flight every dawn, a living alarm clock with a sense of slapstick. Of course, cleverness comes with consequences. Locks in this world are simple, knots are common, and cupboards are basically philosophical suggestions. A monkey learns doors the way a goose learns opinions, thoroughly and at volume. Some owners fasten little bells to belts or collars, the same way the potter's collars jingled for tiny dogs. The sound helps you know where curiosity is happening, and whether to rescue the Ani jar or the neighbor's wig, which, as you now discover, makes an excellent hat for a primate. You watch the performer reign in the chaos with a tap and a treat. The monkey sits, hands folded like a miniature philosopher who intends to refute your argument with interpretive dance. It scratches the back of its neck exactly as the stern fishmonger does, earning another round of laughter. There's the secret: imitation. Greeks call it mimesis when poets do it, and hilarity when monkeys do. Either way, the mirror delights. A cat on a windowsill blinks. Unamused, the monkey responds with the universal gesture for "I have no respect for windowsill authority," and the cat files a silent but eternal complaint. Practicality joins the play. Monkeys eat scraps, figs, nuts, bits of bread dipped in watered wine, the occasional beet which they dislike but accept for appearances. They need shade and sleep, warmth in winter, and something to do, or they will find something to do. Someone shows you a tiny harness braided from soft leather, kinder than a chain, easier on busy little shoulders. You hold it, and weigh the compromise all pets ask from their people: freedom braided with safety, companionship measured against the world's hazards. The performer nods. He rides my shoulder when we travel, he says, so he sees the towns before I do. There are images, too, that fix these creatures in paint and clay: a tiny figure clinging to a branch on a drinking cup, a comic scene where a monkey steals a grape at a banquet, a decorative handle carved in a long-tailed silhouette. Even when they aren't present, people talk about them the way sailors talk about favorable winds, fondly, with a little superstition. Monkeys bring coin and laughter, a vendor tells you. They also bring missing spoons. Both may be true, which feels like the most Greek sentence you can imagine. Not all stories are sweetness. Now and then a monkey bites what it shouldn't or tumbles from a wall, and the owner learns that affection is brave work. But tonight, fortune is kind. The performer ends with a flourish. The monkey spreads its arms, receives applause like sunlight, and then, moment of stillness, rests its head in the crook of the man's elbow. You see the tenderness you saw with the goat, the loyalty you felt with the dog, the dignified silliness of the geese, and the cat's insistence on doing things its own way. Companionship is a wide word. There is room inside it for mischief. As the crowd drifts off, you linger. The monkey has discovered your reflection in a polished bronze mirror, and is making faces you hope do not catch on in human society. You answer with a face of your own. It gasps, delighted, and copies you exactly. There it is again, the mirror. We love animals that show us our best selves. We somehow also love the ones that show us our ridiculous ones. Maybe that's why the Greeks keep letting monkeys into their stories and sometimes their homes, not just for the tricks, but for the reminder that laughter loosens the day. Wind cools the stones. The performer settles cross-legged, the monkey curling like a comma on his knee. You offer the last fig from your pouch. Tiny fingers take it, peel it neatly, and share one seed back with you in what feels like a treaty between species. Bells from a distant shrine drift over the roofs. Somewhere, a goose objects to nothing in particular, a cat inspects the now safe spindle, a dog arranges itself at your heel like punctuation. You rise, smiling, and step on, carrying the soft echo of clever little hands and the knowledge that even in a world of marble, mischief finds a home. You walk away from the little acrobat with clever hands, and the street settles into a softer register. A breeze threads the vine-covered pergolas, and from somewhere above your head comes a tremor of silver notes, thin at first, then bright as port oil. You tip your chin up. Hanging under the shade beams, in reed-woven cages the color of straw, small birds practice their evening scales. The monkey's applause fades behind you, the geese file their usual objections. The cat, of course, pretends not to listen while inching 3 whiskers closer. The city, which has spent all afternoon being a market, turns now into a music room. Songbirds are old friends in Greek ears. Poets love the nightingale's liquid voice, the swallows chatter over roof tiles, the lark's sky-high trill, in verse and vase paint. Birds show up so often they feel like neighbors who never miss a festival. That is your steady fact tonight. Greek life, its poetry, its proverbs, its easy metaphors, leans on birdsong the way a tired back leans on a warm wall. When households hang little wicker cages in courtyards, they are not inventing a fashion, they are inviting a familiar tourist to live at arm's length. You pause beneath a cage the size of a round bread loaf. The door is a tiny loop of willow, the water dish, a shallow clay thimble that catches light like a coin at the bottom of a fountain. A finch hops to the perch, and eyes you gravely as one can with a head the size of an olive, and then lets loose a run of notes that would make a flute teacher resign on the spot. Someone has tied a bit of blue ribbon near the hook. In the evenings, the family covers the cage with a light lion to say sleep, and in the mornings, they lift it away like opening a window. The ritual pleases everyone except the household cat, who submits a daily proposal to remove the window entirely. Proposal denied. Nightingales, those celebrated divas of spring, visit gardens and groves, and sometimes, when luck favors patience and a careful hand, people keep one close for a season. You listen to a cage on the next beam, where a brown-gray singer pulses its throat until the courtyard seems to hold a spring dusk of its own. Historians still argue whether nightingales were commonly kept or mostly admired wild, the evidence a scatter of mentions and images that never quite settle. You accept the uncertainty and accept the gift, a voice that pours ease into the day like honey into warm milk. Training happens by osmosis as much as intent. Someone with an ulus, the twin-pipe reed flute, awfully plays a simple phrase in the afternoons, After a week, the finch in the second cage begins to echo the curve of it, not perfectly, but with such intent that everyone applauds. The goose volunteers to be vocal coach and is not invited back, for obvious reasons. Children grind millet to dust between their fingers, tapping the rhythm onto the sill while the bird keeps time with its head. You, who couldn't keep a beat earlier when the monkey clapped, now find yourself swaying in time to a creature that weighs less than your fig. Not every cage holds a hometown voice. Trade blows in and out of the Pyrenees like weather, and sometimes the cargo sings. In a wealthy house you pass, a longer, greener silhouette preens in a deeper cage, a parakeet brought along the roots that reach past the Levant toward far India. It clicks its beak, eyes bright as laurel berries, and then tries a word it has learned, chair. Be Joyce, followed by something that sounds suspiciously like where's my fig. You laugh, it repeats your laugh back at you with such accuracy that you feel briefly impersonated. Historians still argue whether parrots were familiar to classical Athens or mostly a Hellenistic novelty after long campaigns opened new roads, but the mimic in front of you doesn't care about timelines. It wants applause, a seed, and perhaps your earring. Cages themselves tell small stories. Some are all reed, woven like baskets and light enough to sway when the sea breeze turns a corner. Others are wooden frames with thin bronze wires, a bit of shine for a dining room, set with perches rubbed smooth by patient feet. A few thrifty souls reuse perforated gourds as little bird apartments, the round-shaped tempering drafts. Water drips into cups through a tiny clay spout, because even birds enjoy the fountain effect. The baker's wife swears her blackbird sings best when its bath is the exact temperature of soup. You do not test this. The blackbird has seniority. Care is constant and calming. Seeds, chopped greens, a crumb of yesterday's barley loaf softened with a spoon of water, a bath at midday, shade and heat, warmth in winter from the same brazier that toasts chestnuts. The old man in the corner has a soft brush he uses to tie fallen seed husks, and you suspect he likes the sweeping more than he admits. He tells you he once knew a goldfinch who learned to tug a thread tied to a tiny door latch, because curiosity is universal and locks are merely suggestions. You nod, thinking of the monkey, and make a note to double-check any cupboards that hold Ani. Then there is the neighborhood orchestra. A swallow has tucked straw above the lintel and scolds every passer-by, a sparrow performs percussion against a bronze pan. Down the lane, someone whistles back and a thrush answers from an olive tree like a polite duet partner. Over the roofline, a dog huffs approval and collapses into a nap, while the cat assumes the supervisory role of local bird appreciation committee chair, formerly immediate snack coordinator, now rebranded for public relations. The goose, not to be upstaged, produces one long, soulful note that is technically music if you love democracy. A neighbor leans out with a tiny show and tell, a cricket in a walnut shell cage, chirping a soft, steady rhythm that sounds like summer sun into thread. It's an oddity, she admits, a little charm for luck and lullabies. She keeps it by the loom when evenings stretch. You smile and promise yourself you'll ask more about insect companions another night. For now, the birds carry the melody. Also, the cat has opinions about walnut shells that need not be aired. Amid the humor lies usefulness. Birds eat beetles from the kitchen threshold and announce the weather by singing more or less when the breeze shifts. They teach patience to children, quiet hands, slow breath, kindness measured in seeds, and they give the old a reason to sit in sunlight a little longer, listening for the first phrase a young finch finally gets right. That's the true center of these cages. Not display, but daily ceremony, a small shared craft of care that turns noise into music. Evening lowers itself like a lamp shade. Someone draws lion over the cages with a practiced lift, and the courtyard dims by a note. A last phrase hangs in the air as if the nightingale needs to sign its name. Then stillness gathers, friendly and complete. You hear the baker laugh 2 doors over, you hear the monkey yawn like a creaking hinge, you hear the dog's paws thump twice as he rolls to the cool side of the stone. You stay under the pergola for another breath, because the hush after birdsong is its own kind of lullaby. You move on at last, footsteps soft, carrying the memory of reeds clicking gently, and a parakeet that says hello like a cheering neighbor. Earlier, a goat tugged you toward. Louder, the G's announced their policies, the cat practiced serene authority, the dog matched your stride, the monkey stole your heart, and a fig. Now the birds give the evening its edge of silver. In a city that loves words, these are the syllables that require no alphabet, only listening. You step from the hush of bird cages into the cool interior of a stone house, where the air smells faintly of oil lamps and stored grain. At first you think the silence is complete until you catch a soft slithering sound, like sand pouring slowly through an unseen crack. You turn toward the hearth, and there, coiled in a dark corner near the family's offering bowl, lies a snake. Not a poisonous viper with fangs ready, but a gentle, harmless serpent leak, shining, and strangely at ease. And yes, in this house it is not an intruder. It is a pet. The Greeks, practical as always, had a knack for folding the unusual into the everyday. Snakes moved easily into their symbolism. They were guardians of the earth, protectors of thresholds, and companions of the healing god Asclepios. To keep a snake in the house was not only tolerable, it could even be considered auspicious. You can imagine how it began, A snake slithered into a storeroom and began reducing the mouse population. Rather than chase it away, the family began leaving it offerings of milk or crumbs of bread, until, little by little, it was considered one of their own. You watch as a boy tiptoes near, holding out a shallow dish of barley mixed with a splash of milk. The snake flicks its tongue, investigates, and then glides forward with slow dignity. The child laughs quietly, calling it by name. Guess, even snakes earned names here. Perhaps Spiral or Brightney. Some families painted small serpents onto household shrines to honor protective spirits, and keeping the real thing close at hand felt like a living emblem of safety. Historians still argue whether snakes in Greek houses were deliberately tamed or merely tolerated as useful mousers. The truth, as always, may lie in between. But there are hints of true affection. One old story tells of a woman who mourned a household serpent when it disappeared, saying the hearth felt lonelier without its silent guardian. Imagine grieving for a creature others might chase away with sticks. That says something about bonds formed in quiet corners. Practical benefits were obvious. A snake kept the storeroom clear of gnawing pests, moving where cats and dogs could not reach. But alongside this utility lay a hush of reverence. In some sanctuaries, sacred snakes were allowed to coil freely around the altars. At Epidaurus, worshippers seeking healing sometimes awoke to find a snake had slithered across their bed, which was considered a sign of blessing rather than terror. Try telling that to a modern guest, you probably wouldn't survive their shriek. In homes, the companionship was subtler. You picture yourself sitting by a brazier on a winter evening, a wool cloak around your shoulders, when a snake glides near the warmth, curling like an ornament at the hearth's edge. Children whisper to it, as though it were a kindly spirit, while their grandmother warns them not to step on its tail lest the household luck be disturbed. It is neither cuddly like a lapdog nor comical like a goose, but its calm presence weaves a thread of continuity, steady, watchful, protective. A quirky tidbit. Some Greeks believed snakes could sense earthquakes before humans could, slipping out into the open just before the ground trembled. Others thought they carried the souls of ancestors, quietly visiting from another realm. Whether truth or folklore, the association deepened the sense that a snake was more than just a pest control solution. It was a companion straddling the natural and the mystical. And yes, humor found its way into this arrangement too. You can imagine a visiting guest leaping onto a stool when the household serpent made a surprise appearance, only to have the family laugh and say, "Oh, don't worry, that's just Bright Eye, he never bites." The guest breathes heavily, while the children jiggle behind their hands. Another day, a snake curls into a laundry basket, and clothes are left unwashed until it decides to leave. That's, it seems, have always exercised Veda powers over human schedules. You lean closer now, watching the lamplight shimmer across the scales, each one like a polished tile in miniature. The serpent shifts slightly, making no sound except the faint brush of its body over stone. You sense the same paradox the Greeks must have felt, fear and comfort entwined, danger and safety balanced in one graceful form. A goat could amuse, a dog could guard, a bird could sing, but a snake brought mystery, the kind that deepened the walls of a home into something almost sacred. As you rise to leave the house, you glance back once more. The boy has settled beside the serpent, whispering a story into the flickering lamplight, and the animal listens, or at least seems to. Whether it understands or not is beside the point. The companionship is real, and across centuries, you feel its quiet weight. You step back into the night air, the hush of the hearth still clinging to you, and follow the road that curves toward the sea. The sound of waves comes first as a whisper, then as a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat beneath the city's stone skin. You climb a bluff where fishermen mend their nets, and suddenly the water spreads wide before you, dark, shimmering, infinite. From the surface rises a shape, sleek and arched, then another beside it. Dolphins. Few animals in Greek stories hold such a blend of myth and memory as dolphins. Sailors tell you they appear like old friends, racing alongside ships, leaping in arcs that glimmer in the sun. To the Greeks, these creatures are more than just marine neighbors. They are rescuers, tricksters, and sometimes even musicians. Mainstream fact: ancient writers from Homer to later poets described dolphins leaping with sailors, guiding ships, and even saving those who fell overboard. These stories spread like salt air, convincing people that dolphins carried a special favor of the gods. You sit on a stone, watching the water churn silver under the moon. A fisherman beside you hums softly, explaining that dolphins have followed his boat for years. They wait near the stern, snapping up stray fish that tumble from his nets, and in return, they sometimes herd schools closer, nudging fortune toward him with sleek noses. He shrugs as if this arrangement is ordinary, but the way his eyes soften tells you it is something closer to friendship. Historians still argue whether Greeks truly kept dolphins as pets, or whether they were wild companions woven into sailors' lives. What seems certain is the bond. Inscriptions, vase paintings, and even temple dedications praise the dolphin as an ally. In some tales, children who played by the sea befriended dolphins so completely that they rode on their backs. One famous legend tells of a boy musician whose dolphin carried him across the waves, enchanted by his lyre. Whether literal or lyrical, the image stuck. Anne and dolphin, partners at the edge of the world. You lean forward as one of the creatures arcs near, its back cutting the surface like a polished blade. For a breath, you imagine slipping into the water, feeling the sudden cool shock, and then being lifted by the dolphin's steady strength. It is not ownership, not domestication, but a companionship born of meeting halfway, humans in their ships, dolphins in their element, both curious enough to linger. Practical jokes, of course, emerge in such meetings. Fishermen laugh about dolphins stealing the best catch, leaving only scraps in the nets. They are like neighbors. One man tells you, they help you with your roof one day, then borrow your ladder and never return it. Another swears a dolphin once splashed him so thoroughly he returned to shore, wetter than the catch. Even here, the humor flows. Friendship with an animal means accepting its mischief along with its help. As night deepens, you notice a carving on a nearby shrine, a boy on the back of a dolphin, both smiling as though the waves themselves were a playground. Offerings of shells and small clay figurines rest at the base, tokens of gratitude to these sea companions. You touch the cool stone and feel how deeply the Greeks tied animals to their sense of wonder, blurring the border between everyday and divine. Somewhere offshore, a dolphin leaps high, its body silvered by moonlight, then crashes back with a splash that makes the G's back in the city seem positively quiet. You laugh softly, realizing that while you may never leash a dolphin like a goat or coax one into a courtyard like a bird, the Greeks treasured them all the same, as companions of the open sea, proof that even the vast aging could feel like home when a friendly shadow swam beside you. The sea air lingers as you return inland, through narrow lanes where houses lean shoulder to shoulder, their courtyards hidden behind wooden gates. One such gate swings open, and you catch sight of a small, deliberate movement in the sun-dappled dust. A tortoise, no, not scurrying like the monkeys, not honking like the G's, not prowling like the cats. Just steady, unhurried, as though time itself walks in a shell. Tortoises and turtles are familiar in Greece, tucked into gardens, courtyards, even temple grounds. Mainstream fact, they appear in Greek art and mythology often, most famously as the shell used by Hermes to craft the first lyre, stringing it with gut to create the instrument that charmed gods. Beyond myth, the actual animal found favor as a gentle household companion, a pet requiring little but offering quiet amusement. You lean against the doorway, watching as a child sprinkles lettuce leaves in a shallow dish. The tortoise ambles over, jaws working with comical precision, each bite exaggerated as though it is savoring a five-course symposium meal. Children adore this. A dog may knock them over in enthusiasm, a cat may ignore them, but a tortoise keeps its own pace, reliable as sunrise. Historians still argue whether tortoises were intentionally kept as pets or merely tolerated garden dwellers. Evidence suggests both. Some homes built little stone pens in courtyards, complete with shallow pools. Others let them wander freely, a living curiosity among the herbs. Whatever the case, people found ways to fold them into daily life. There's humor, too. Imagine a housewife chasing a tortoise who has dragged itself into the kitchen, clattering into bowls with its shell. Or a philosopher, pacing in thought, suddenly realizing his sandal is being gnawed by a stubborn reptile. One neighbor tells you of a tortoise that escaped so often the family painted its shell with a streak of bright red dye, an ancient version of putting a bell on the cat. A quirky tidbit, some Greeks believed tortoises brought luck, especially when they appeared in courtyards uninvited. Others whispered they absorbed household misfortunes into their heavy shells. You glance at this slow creature under the grape arbor, and it does indeed seem like a quiet guardian, carrying burdens so humans don't have to. At night, when the family gathers in the courtyard, the tortoise curls into itself near the brazier's fading heat. The children stroke its shell, smooth in places, ridged in others, like a mosaic made by time. The grandmother mutters that it will live longer than all of them, and perhaps she isn't far wrong. Its patience feels eternal. The companionship here is not in noise or play but in rhythm. In a city where dogs bark, roosters crow, and geese scold, a tortoise offers silence, reminding its keepers to slow down. It is the pet of those who prefer presence to performance, a creature that makes you smile not by tricks but by simply being there, steady and unchanging. You step back into the street, sunlight on your face, and carry that sense of stillness with you. A goat may make you laugh, a monkey may steal your figs, but a tortoise teaches you something subtler, that companionship can also be quiet, and sometimes, the strangest pet is the one that simply waits with you for the day to pass. From the quiet shuffle of the tortoise, you drift toward the docks, where the cries of traders mix with the creak of rigging. Bales of spice, jars of oil, and bolts of bright cloth crowd the quay side. Yet amid this jumble of trade, it isn't the goods themselves that catch your eye, it's what sometimes crawls, flutters, or struts out of them. Exotic pets, carried across seas by merchants eager to impress curious buyers. Picture the scene. A ship from the east unloads its cargo, and tucked among the amphorae is a cage of dazzling color. Inside, a peacock unfurls its feathers, each one glittering with iridescence, eye spots staring like 100 tiny guardians. The dock workers whistle, children press forward, and a wealthy nobleman leans in, already imagining how the bird would look strutting across his marble courtyard. A goose might honk, a cat might purr, but a peacock, well, it announces itself like a visiting king. Mainstream fact: peacocks were introduced to Greece from farther east, probably via Persia and trade networks extending toward India. At first, they were staggering rarities, kept in menageries or temple precincts as living wonders. Later, they became fashionable among the wealthy, admired for beauty more than companionship. Still, in certain homes, they crossed the line from status symbol into pet, fed delicacies and allowed to roam gardens like living jewels. Historians still argue whether these exotic creatures were common in Greek households or mostly confined to estates of the rich. Evidence suggests that ordinary families rarely saw them except as spectacles. Yet imagine being a child allowed to toss grains to a peacock's tail shimmering like captured sunlight, its proud stride both ridiculous and majestic. That memory would linger like perfume long after the bird had strutted away. And it wasn't only peacocks. Merchants sometimes carried monkeys, already familiar from street shows, but also stranger companions, a brightly feathered bird from the east that echoed human words, a spotted animal that might have been a small exotic cat, even tales of strange lizards displayed for coin. Each arrival blurred the line between curiosity and pet. A trader showing off his parrot might sell it to a noble lady enchanted by its chatter, or to a symposium host who wanted his guests to laugh when a bird interrupted the conversation with a perfectly timed drink. You can imagine the chaos of such ownership. A parrot squawking in the middle of a temple procession. A peacock stealing figs from the same dish meant for honored guests. Or a small exotic animal escaping its cage, sending neighbors scrambling up onto stools. While children squeal with delight. A goat on a leash might turn heads, but a parrot demanding wine. That, surely, was the height of strange. A quirky tidbit: some Greeks believed peacock feathers had protective powers, warding off the evil eye. So not only did the bird parade through gardens like royalty, but it also served as a walking charm against misfortune. You imagine a hostess smoothing her gown while her pet peacock struts by, as though to say, "Yes, I have divine insurance against envy." Don't you? Of course, not every experiment in exotic companionship went smoothly. A family unused to caring for tropical birds might struggle when winter winds blew through with ends. A monkey, too clever by half, could cause more mischief than joy. And yet, for those with patience and means, these animals added not only beauty but conversation. They were living curiosities, proof that the Greek world stretched far beyond its shores. You stand at the edge of the quay, watching as a sailor lifts a wicker cage, the bird inside fluttering with a cry half strange, half familiar. Around you, the usual pets, the dogs, the goats, the geese, belong to the city. But these creatures, shimmering and foreign, carry whispers of distant lands. To keep one was to keep a piece of the wider world in your own courtyard. And that, to the Greeks, was both wondrous and just a little bit strange. From the glitter of peacock feathers and the chatter of parrots, you wander into a quieter quarter of the city, where the streets are narrower, the courtyards smaller, and daily life hums with simpler rhythms. Here you don't hear grand calls or exotic cries. Instead, you notice a gentler sound, the steady chirp of insects, soft and persistent, as though the air itself is stitched with song. You pause, and realize that some of these chirps are not wild at all. They come from tiny cages hanging by doorways. Yes, grasshoppers and crickets, kept as little charms. A humble pet, but one with music built into its body. Children delight in them, holding walnut shells or clay jars pierced with holes, inside which a single cricket sings tirelessly. At night, when the city rests, that soft trill soothes the household like a lullaby, a natural kind of lyre that never needs tuning. Mainstream fact: Greeks admired the sound of cicadas and crickets, often linking them with poetry and the muses. Cicadas, especially, symbolized immortality and art. Aristocrats even wore golden cicada brooches in their hair as tokens of cultural pride. From there, it's not difficult to imagine the smaller, humbler practice of keeping live chirpers close by, tokens of luck and companionship. A boy runs up, proudly showing you his walnut shell cage. Inside, a tiny grasshopper rubs its wings, producing a rhythm that seems far too loud for such a small body. The boy grins, as if his captured summer itself. His grandmother, sitting nearby with her spindle, nods approvingly. She tells you that a cricket's song brings good fortune, and that when it quiets suddenly, rain is coming. Historians still argue whether these insects were genuinely thought of as pets or simply tokens, but in practice, they were cherished enough to be fed crumbs and carried from place to place in tiny woven baskets. There's humor here too. Imagine a household gathered for dinner when, from the rafters, a cricket in its little cage starts up a furious chorus, drowning out conversation. The host raises his cup, laughing, and declares the insect is clearly the most opinionated guest. Children sometimes prank one another by sneaking cages into beds, so that the unlucky sleeper spends the night accompanied by an overly eager lullaby. Not unlike today's neighbor whose wind chimes test your patience at midnight. A quirky tidbit: in some regions, girls were said to keep grasshoppers as symbols of their voice, a charm for singing well. Others simply admired the resilience of creatures that could sing endlessly, even without much food. You imagine a young woman plucking her lyre while a cricket in its cage provides a steady backing rhythm, a dude between human and insect across the quiet courtyard. You hold one of the cages to your ear now, the sound filling you with a strange calm. Unlike the latter sparked by a monkey or the stern dignity of a goose, this companionship is almost invisible, hidden in sound rather than sight. A cricket never struts, never tumbles, never steals figs. It simply sings. And somehow, that song, delicate, persistent, becomes part of the household's life, weaving into its sleep and its stories. As you leave the lane, the chirping follows you, fading softly with distance. And you realize, even the smallest creatures found a place in Greek hearts. Whether as symbols, charms, or simple comfort, their songs stitch threads of warmth into homes of stone. The chirping fades behind you as you wander into the countryside, where the fields stretch wide and the air smells of tilled earth and sweet. A low sound reaches your ears, low, heavy, deliberate. You glance up and see a farmer leading his ox back from the plow, the animal's hide glossy with sweat, its horns glinting in the sun. Most oxen in Greece are tools of survival, yoked to fields, vile for bread and wine. But every so often, one of these great beasts steps beyond livestock and into something stranger, a beloved companion too dear to ever eat. Mainstream fact: oxen were among the most important working animals of the Greek world, used for plowing, hauling, and sacrifice. Yet inscriptions and stories hint that some farmers grew deeply attached to certain oxen, refusing to slaughter them even when custom demanded it. The animals lived long, hampered lives, more like family members than beasts of burden. You picture yourself following the farmer home. The ox trudges not into a pen but into the courtyard, where children greet it with pats and handfuls of clover. They laugh as it lowers its massive head, letting them scratch behind its ears, the same way you might treat a dog. At night, instead of being tied far away, it rests near the storeroom wall, where the family checks on it as if it were a trusted elder. Historians still argue whether sparing an ox was an eccentricity or a quiet protest against the sacrificial customs that dominated Greek religion. Yet even in official accounts, there are glimpses of farmers who treated their oxen like companions. Some stories describe retired oxen wandering fields peacefully, no longer yoked but still fed and honored. One quirky tale tells of a village that held a small funeral for a particularly loyal ox, laying garlands across its horns. Of course, humor slipped in too. Imagine a family explaining to neighbors that no, their ox could not be lent for plowing, because it was resting. Or a farmer's wife rolling her eyes as the giant animal wandered into the garden and demolished the lettuce patch, while the children insisted he didn't mean it. Pets, after all, have always been excused for the sort of behavior that would earn livestock a scolding. And yet, there is tenderness here. A man who has spent years guiding the same ox across fields might see it as more than muscle. It has walked beside him through drought and plenty, pulled the plow that brought grain to his table, and stood steady under sun and rain. By the time its back stiffens with age, killing it would feel like killing memory itself. So the ox remains, moving more slowly, eating freely, its great body a living witness to decades of toil. You rest your hand on the ox flank now, feeling the slow rise and fall of its breath. It turns its head, brown eyes calm, and you sense why some Greeks chose to blur the line between laborer and companion. A goat can amuse, a dog can guard, a cricket can sing, but an ox, when cherished, represents gratitude itself. A recognition that sometimes love grows not from play, but from work shared over years. As dusk falls across the fields, the farmer's children climb onto the ox's broad back, laughing as it carries them the short walk home. Not fast, not graceful, but steady, just as it always has been. And the family's affection is plain: this is no mere beast. This is a friend with hooves, horns, and a heart that has plowed their lives into shape. From the fields you drift back toward town, where courtyards glow with lamplight. In one such courtyard, you pause, drawn by the soft trickle of water. A marble basin, shallow and round, reflects the firelight like a fragment of moon. Within it, shapes flicker, limn, darting, shimmering. Fish. Not on the table, not in the pan, but alive, swirling gently beneath the surface. Mainstream fact: the Greeks kept fish not only as food but sometimes as ornament. Wealthy households and sanctuaries built fountains and pools where bright carp or other small species lived, admired for their movement and the soothing music of water. These were not mere decorations. They became companions of leisure, watched in the quiet of evenings when conversation slowed. You crouch by the basin. A boy leans beside you, tossing crumbs of barley into the water. The fish gather, mouths opening like tiny bells. Their colors catch the lamplight: silver, gold, a faint shimmer of red. The boy grins proudly, explaining each by name: Flash, Little Sun, Moon, Dale. For him, these creatures are not anonymous. They are friends whose presence makes the courtyard feel alive. Historians still argue whether decorative fish were widespread or confined to the wealthier classes. Archaeological traces hint at marble basins and elaborate plumbing in grand houses, suggesting fish keeping was a mark of refinement. But ordinary folk, too, may have kept small jars or troughs with minnows, not for show but for simple delight. There is humor here. Picture a symposium guest, deep in philosophical debate, leaning too far over the fountain to admire the fish and tumbling in with a splash that ruins his dignity but delights the household. Or a little girl solemnly scolding her fish for refusing to come when called, as though stubbornness were a shared language across species. A quirky tidbit: some Greeks believed certain fish brought luck or protection. Sailors' families sometimes kept a small live fish in a household basin as a charm for safe voyages, its survival symbolizing their loved one's safe return. Watching a fish dart lively through water gave comfort that the sea, too, would be kind. You dip your hand into the basin, the water cool against your skin, and the fish scatter then swirl back curiously, brushing your fingers with fins like whispers. The sensation is oddly intimate, companionship without touch, trust without words. It is a kind of stillness, more restful than bird song, more tranquil than the goats tugging or the dogs bark. Here, in this courtyard, pets do not leap or bleat. They ripple. And in that ripple, you sense the same bond that threads through every Greek home you visited tonight. Whether on land or sea, wing or fin, the people here found ways to share their lives with creatures, not only for work or sacrifice, but for affection, amusement, and a little wonder. The boy hums a tune as his fish circle lazily, the water catching stars from the sky above. You rise, the song of crickets following, and leave the courtyard with a softer step, as though the still water had slowed your own heart to its gentlest rhythm. You move on from the quiet shimmer of fish, but as you walk the darkened lanes, you hear laughter spilling from a doorway. Inside, men recline on couches at a symposium, cups in hand, voices weaving between serious thought and playful jest. And among the painted walls and smoky lamps, you catch sight of something stranger still, a small figure carved on a cup, half real, half dream, an imagined beast perched like a pet beside its master. The Greeks, after all, were never content with only what their eyes could see. They filled their world with creatures from the edges of maps and minds: griffins, satyrs, winged horses, lions with human faces. In their stories, these beasts often became companions, symbols, or even guardians. And though no family ever led a griffin on a leash through the agora, in their imaginations they might as well have. Mainstream fact: mythology saturated daily Greek life. Homes displayed frescoes and pottery showing gods with their animal attendants: Athena with her owl, Dionysos with his panther, Artemis with her hounds. These divine pets blurred into inspiration for ordinary people. Children played at having mythic companions, pretending their puppy was Cerberus or their goose a sacred swan. Myth lent everyday pets a layer of magic. You picture a little boy with a garden tortoise, solemnly telling his friends that it is really a miniature version of the great world tortoise who carries the earth on its back. Or a girl with a cat insisting it must be a secret lion, disguised to guard her bed. Humor was constant. A poet once joked that his pet goat had the soul of a satyr, always dancing, and never listening. And at symposia, clever men sketched satyrs or winged hounds on their drinking cups, then teased each other with, "If only I could keep one at home, the neighbors would never dare steal figs again." Historians still argue whether these imagined pets were simply metaphors or whether Greeks, in their private hearts, truly blurred the line between reality and myth. The evidence is playful, scattered, impossible to pin down, yet the persistence of such images suggests that imagination itself was a kind of companionship. A quirky tidbit: in some rural regions, families left out a little bread or wine for the nymphs' pets, believing that unseen creatures, fauns, spirits, even miniature satyrs, might wander by and bring mischief if neglected. Was it real belief, or simply tradition that became cozy habit? Perhaps both. As you linger in the symposium, you see a cup passed around, a man riding not a horse, but a dolphin, like the legend you heard earlier. Laughter ripples. Another cup shows a youth with a griffin perched calmly at his side, as though it were nothing more unusual than a dog. These imagined pets reveal how Greek hearts work. They weren't just practical farmers or stern philosophers. They were dreamers who invited fantasy into their homes, draping myth across the shoulders of reality until even a tortoise might glow with divine echoes. You step back into the night, the street cool beneath your feet. The real animals, the goats, geese, cats, dogs, monkeys, snakes, birds, fish, and tortoises are still there, tucked into courtyards, coiled by hearths, floating in basins. Yet above them hover the invisible ones: owls of Athena, panthers of Dionysos, dolphins of Apollo. Real and imagined, side by side, all part of the strange menagerie that made Greek life shimmer with possibility. The night draws quieter as you wander back through the lanes, your sandals brushing against stones that have carried goats, geese, cats, dogs, monkeys, snakes, birds, tortoises, oxen, and even peacocks. You've seen fish swirling in fountains, grasshoppers chirping in walnut shells, and mythic beasts painted onto cups as if they might leap to life. Each step carries the echo of all those creatures, real and imagined, and you begin to see the pattern that ties them together. The Greeks, so often remembered for marble statues and grand epics, were also people who laughed at a goose's scolding, scratched a dog's ears, listened to a cricket's lullaby, and spared an old ox because love outweighed utility. Mainstream fact, household life in Greece was threaded with animals, not only as workers or sacrifices but as daily companions, sources of humor, comfort, and even spiritual reassurance. This truth lingers in art, poetry, and anecdotes that survive across centuries. And still, historians argue. Were these truly pets in the modern sense, or simply useful animals that occasionally inspired affection? Evidence is patchy, the stories scattered like crumbs for a goat to nibble. But when you hear a mother hush her child with the promise of feeding the household tortoise tomorrow, or a fisherman laugh about dolphins who borrow his catch, or a poet compare his noisy parrot to a philosopher interrupting debates, well, the word pet begins to feel less important than the warmth behind it. A quirky tidbit, one inscription from a tombstone mourns a dog named Parthenope, praised for loyalty and sweetness. Another vase painting shows a child cradling a goose, face pressed against its feathers. These fragments remind you that affection, even for animals, leaves traces strong enough to cross time. You pause in a courtyard, listening. From one house, a goose honks indignantly at nothing. From another, a dog gives a single bark before settling back to sleep. A cricket chirps steadily, a sound as old as the walls themselves. Somewhere in the distance, waves lap against the shore, and you fancy a dolphin leaping just beyond the moon's silver path. All of it the voices of animals, the imaginations of humans, intertwine into a single fabric. And as you settle onto a bench, you feel the lesson pressing close. To the Greeks, strange pets were never just curiosities. They were threads of companionship, humor, and wonder woven through the loom of daily life. A goat's bleat could lighten the market, a snake could sanctify the hearth, a fish could soothe the evening, and a parrot could make guests laugh until wine spilled. Together, they reveal Greek hearts not only as clever or philosophical, but as tender, playful, and willing to share their world with whatever creature walked, flew, sang, or swam close enough. The night has settled completely now, wrapping the streets of Greece in a hush as gentle as a woolen cloak. The courtyards are quiet, the animals tucked into their corners, dogs curled near doorways, cats stretched across warm roof tiles, tortoises withdrawn into their shells. Even the geese, those tireless guardians, have quieted, their murmurs softened into sleep. You walk slowly through the silence, feeling the rhythm of the city slow with each step, as if the stones themselves are exhaling after a long day. The air is cool, touched by the faint scent of olive wood fading on a hearth. Somewhere, a single cricket continues its steady psalm, carrying the memory of summer into the stillness of night. The sound is not sharp or insistent, it is patient, like a thread guiding you gently toward rest. You imagine lying back on a low couch, the rush of the sea in the distance, a dog sigh at your feet, and the flutter of a bird's wings settling one last time in its reed cage. As you close your eyes, you picture the gentle procession of pets you've met tonight, the goat tugging its ribbon, the goose standing guard, the cat with amber eyes, the loyal dog, the mischievous monkey, the snake coiled in the hearth's shadow, the singing birds, the dolphins dancing in moonlit water, the tortoise beneath the grapevine, the fish shimmering in marble basins, the grasshopper chirping in its shell, the beloved ox resting after years of toil, and even the mythic beasts that lived only in dreams. Each one offers a different note, louder, comfort, wonder, protection, woven together into a lullaby across time. So let your breathing match theirs, slow as a tortoise, steady as an ox, quiet as a snake, soft as the wings of a nightingale folding in sleep. The hearth glows faintly, the stars dim overhead, and the night carries you gently into its keeping. Sweet dreams.